Good day. Welcome back to Dika's Adventures. I am Dika. Today I am going to tell you a story. Those of you who like hunting stories, most of us hunters, we like to share them. I like to go down to my local sportsman's club and talk about our stories, especially during hunting season, deer hunting season, and we share all our stories. It's a great pastime and I love doing it. So here I am. I'm going to share you a story of the second deer that I ever harvested, which was an absolute disaster. I made more mistakes than probably anyone. I would love to hear in the comments similar circumstances where maybe you had a story that just didn't turn out well. So it was the second deer I harvested. I did harvest the deer, and here's the story. It's I in no way, shape, or form do I condone the methods that I took to get this deer, but I did get this deer. And it took an awfully long time. So it was November 22nd, and I had not seen a deer all season. Now, prior to that, obviously, it was my first season that I saw deer, and I saw a ton of deer. So the first mistake that I made was I didn't put the work in for the next season. I just figured I saw a ton of deer the year before. I changed my tactics. And I'm going to see a ton of deer this year. Wasn't the case. They had changed their patterns, and maybe I was just a little too cocky. So it was November 22nd. I believe October 17th was opening day here in New England. I believe the year was 2014, I think. 2014, 2015. I'm not sure. And I hadn't seen a deer all year. So I hiked further in outside of my comfort zone, and I was still relatively novice at hunting, and it's about a mile, 25-minute walk in, and I was kind of afraid of the dark, and I asked a friend of mine. I said, I found this area, there's a fresh scrape, I think it was done that day. I want to go in with my climber, and I had never used a climber. I ended up selling it. I had a Summit Viper XL. Great climber. It was absolutely wonderful. So I said, I want to go in with my climber. I marked a tree. I cut some lanes in there. I think there's going to be a deer there. There's a lot of sign. So he said, okay. And I didn't want to walk in at uncharted territory that I really didn't know my way around by myself in the dark. It just didn't seem like a good idea to me. So my friend, Jim, he got a lightweight stand, a hang-on stand, and some lightweight sticks, and he was going to go in a little further behind me and find a place to randomly set up, and hopefully he would see a deer also. And I think he had gotten one deer this year, that year. So we woke up early, we got to the spot, we walked in, and it was really, really, really warm that morning. It was like 60 degrees that morning. So obviously I had overdressed for the walk-in with a climber on my back, which I am not used to dragging a climber on my back. And by the time I got there, the sun was already coming up. So I was already under the the radar for that. And I was a complete sweat ball. I must have stunk so much. So the lights are on, the sun's already up. I'm hooking my climber around the tree. My friend Jim, he takes off. There's like a ridge. He goes up over that ridge and he goes to set up over there. Now at this point in time, it's probably around, I think sunrise was probably around 6:30, and by this time I think it was like 7:15. It was very late. So I put my climber on, and I was struggling with it. I couldn't get the right level. I couldn't get in it. I couldn't get it to go up the tree. So finally, I get it to go up the tree. And I'm dripping sweat. There's sweat physically dripping off my body. And I thought that there's no way in hell that I would ever see a deer. So I get up to the top. I bring my bow up, everything, and I look down, and my call and my rangefinder are on the ground. Now at this point, I'm up probably 16, 17 feet. So I was like, fuck, this sucks. So I take my climber, I go all the way back down, I grab them, and on my way back up, I couldn't get the bottom of my climber to level out. So I don't know what I was doing wrong. It just couldn't. I was so frustrated. So I just said, screw it. I'll just stay at the level I am. I was probably at about between 9 and 12 feet. So I said, all right, well, I'll just stay here. And by this time, like I said, it was probably 8 o'clock, maybe 7:45. And so I take my jacket off. I hang it on the side of the tree. I'm trying to air out, and I hear what and I was very new to calling and noises that deer make while they're in the woods, and I heard what I thought was like a breeding grunt. It was like a roar, roar. It was really, really deep, and I was like, oh my god, that's a deer. So I took out my call and I did some bleats. I was like rah, rah. And then the breeding grunt turned into a regular grunt, and it was closer. It was like rah, rah, rah. And I was like, oh my god, it's coming in. I can't believe this. Let me get ready. So I stand up in my climber. Granted, I'm 6'2", 230 pounds. I have my jacket off. I'm sweating profusely. So I grab my bow, and I give one last grunt, and the deer comes in hot and heavy. It's got its nose to the ground. It's looking for a doe or looking for another buck. And I was like, holy crap. So I get up and I get in position. I'm a lefty, so I get to shoot my bow, and it comes straight across me and stops to my right, which is kind of a perfect left-hand shot for me, but it stops behind like some brush and a tree. And it was probably at, 10 yards, not even. So I couldn't take the shot. So I just stood there and I waited, and then it came across and directly in front of me at probably 12 yards. Now, this is also a mistake that I did. I shot at it while it was moving. Now, it wasn't running. It was just a slow moving, and I tried to aim ahead of it. But what I should have done, and what I've done in the past or future deer, is just give a sound and it stops. Now, I didn't know that at the time, or I had forgotten because I was caught up in the moment. So I shot at it, and it just stopped. It didn't do anything. It looked around as if nothing happened, and I saw profuse blood, what I thought was profuse blood, down the whole front of it, down its legs. Now, what I probably should have done at this point of time is knocked another arrow and taken another shot, because the animal was still in front of me, and it was apparent that either the arrow just zipped right through and it didn't know, or maybe I just clipped it a little bit. I didn't know, but I saw blood coming down its front legs. So I didn't, and I just let it walk off. I didn't knock another arrow. I just watched it. So that was a mistake on my part. Maybe I should have put another arrow into the animal to secure the first one. It was giving me that extra shot. So it walked off. This was a buck, by the way. I don't know if I told you that. It was a buck. So it walked off, and I just let it go. No, I didn't hear any crashing. I didn't hear it run off. I didn't hear anything. So I text my friend Jim. I said, Jim, I just shot a buck. And I don't know if he was happy or sad for me or frustrated, because he had walked in roughly a mile to hunt with me, and I shot a deer within the first 30 minutes. So he says, well, give it an hour, and I'll continue my hunt here, and then I'll come help you. So we gave it an hour. At that point in time, I saw a couple more deer on the other side, but I never had another shot. 2 does came by. So we get down, and at this point in time, it was probably around 9 o'clock. And we get down, and we're looking, and there's a lot of blood. A lot of blood. It was a dark red blood, and it went off, and I had my bow, and Jim had his backpack, and we proceeded to follow the blood trail. Second mistake, we didn't bring anything with us. We had our bows actually he left his bow at his stand, but I had my bow with me and nothing else. If you're going off into uncharted territory that you don't know where you're going, you should have some essentials with you. One being food and water. I did not bring that. We'll get to that though. So we walk off, and we had good blood for probably the first, I'm going to say 100 yards, which normally, if it's less than 100 yards and I have good blood, I find the animal. So we had good blood for 100 yards, and this deer was going uphill. So we followed it, and it just turned like less and less blood, to the point we were following pinpoints of blood, and the pinpoints were a ways away from each other. So at this point in time, I was all frustrated, and I said I'm never deer hunting again because all I do is shoot deer and wound deer, and it was absolutely horrible, and I was getting down on myself, but we persevered. So at this point in time, we had been tracking probably for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it was probably 10 a.m. 11 a.m. at this point in time. And I had full bibs on and a jacket, and it was probably 65 degrees out in November. It was really, really warm. And we hadn't found the deer yet. So I had called a friend, and I gave him like a GPS coordinate on my phone as to where I am, and maybe he can come in and help us. He did finding us, which was a miracle. I don't know how he found us, but he found us, and then there was 3 of us on the blood trail. Now, to make a long story short, we tracked that blood for probably another hour and a half. And then we came across one area where we thought that the blood was getting a little bit better, and we heard rustling, and then something ran off. So it was probably the deer that I had shot. Shortly after that, I was up on a ridge. We had lost the blood. I was up on a ridge. Jim was in middle ground, and my friend Scott, who had come with us or had found us, he was down in the gully, and he screams, Dika, I found your deer. I found your deer. I'm like, don't screw with me. He's like, no, it's right here. It's right here. So he had gone to walk up on the deer, and I guess the deer was sitting there like this, and he said that the eyes were all fogged over, and he assumed that it was dead. It was not. His story is he walked up on it, and it got up, and I don't know if it came at him or ran away or whatever, but it absolutely scared the shit out of him. And he's like, it's running, and all you heard was just crashing and cracking. It was running full speed through heavy cover. Sorry, my dog's making noises back here. So the deer runs off, and you see that it just kind of collapses. So my 2 buddies says, well, go in there with your bow and take another shot at it and make sure it's in the vitals, and you take another shot. And I said, okay. So I go in there, and the deer's not moving. I could see it. It was a blowdown, and it had like run straight into the blowdown. So I walk up to it, and I'm probably, 10 yards from it, and I draw, and its back is to me. So its head is right here, and its ass is down here. So the only real shot I had was like the spine area. Now, what I should have done in real life, if I was going to put another arrow in the animal, is I would have found a better angle. I would have walked around the other way and taken a shot at the lungs. Or if I could get a heart shot, that'd be great. At this point in time, I couldn't see where I had hit it. So my first mistake is I took another shot. And I shot it in lower back. And it went through the spine, and it went into the lungs. And it got up, and it ran, and it screamed and made some noises, which were horrible. They were horrible. And it ran for maybe 5 feet, and then went head over heels into like a little gully, like almost over another blowdown. At this point in time, I probably should have waited and just let it die, because it wasn't going anywhere anymore. I had spined it, and I believe that in retrospect that I hit the lungs, and it would have bled internally, and I would have just let it die. But I did not. I decided to put another arrow into it. I think that is a mistake on my part. Maybe it wasn't. I mean, in the situation, ultimately, I was sick of tracking it, and I just wanted it to die. But I think by putting another arrow in, maybe I think it would have died anyway in retrospect, looking at it. So I did. I put another arrow in it, and it was up higher. And again, I did not find a better angle. It was in the same area, and I put another. There was probably a 15-yard shot, and I put it up high in the neck, and it ended up coming out here. The deer expired shortly after that. So when I came up on the deer, this is what it looked like. I'll put a picture right here of what it looked like. As you can see, where I hit the deer, it was far back. Turns out it was probably a liver shot that had maybe come out the belly area, or it was far back. And when we ended up field dressing the deer, yeah, you see, ugh, I saw that I shot the liver. So we got there and we looked at the deer, and here's another picture of the 2 wonderful arrows that I put in it that I'm not entirely proud of. We got to the deer. We field dressed the deer. The deer, I think it weighed, when we got it to the butcher finally, I think it weighed like 145 dressed. It wasn't a small deer. One antler was broken off on one side. So we field dressed the deer, and that wasn't an issue. Then we got it. I took I call it the trophy picture, and there's a picture of it right there. And we proceeded to make our way out after that. Now, at this point in time, it's probably noontime, maybe 1 o'clock. I don't remember exactly, but it's hot. It's hot out. So we didn't know where we were. We all had cell phones, and I knew the woods better than anybody. But I didn't know exactly where we were. So we're all trying to navigate on the way out. Now, one of the other gentlemen, when he was looking for it, he says there was a walking path on the other side. So that's a good sign. We were in a state forest outside of the sort of hunting area that we're allowed to hunt. So technically, we recovered the deer on private property. So ideally, we just wanted to get that deer back into the public property that I shot the deer on. So I'm thirsty. We found the trail, and we proceeded walking backwards in the direction where we came. I think what we should have done, spent a little more time on our GPS and trying to navigate where we're going. There was 3 of us, and we're not dum-dums, but we were acting like dum-dums. Maybe because we had been in the hot sun tracking a deer, and we haven't ate or drank anything in, I don't know, since 7 this morning. I'm sure we were dehydrated at that point in time. Even so, we probably should have just followed the blood trail back, made our way that way. So we got on a trail, and we felt like we were going in the right direction. It turns out we were going in the right direction. And then we came across a gentleman, a very, very muscle-bound gentleman with 2 poles, and he's walking. He looked like a bodybuilder, and we kind of asked him for directions. He's like, "Oh my God, you have a deer," and all this other stuff. And we talked with him for a moment, and we were like, "Well, where does this path lead? Does this lead back to the building where the lake is?" And we were hunting, obviously, near a building where there was a lake. And he goes, yeah, just follow this the whole way. And we're like, "Oh, great, sweet, we're on the right way." So we followed that. And my friend Jim, he's like, "I think we're going in the wrong direction." I said, No, it's right up here, it's right up here. I was wrong, and he was right. So we had dragged that deer, 140-pound deer, about a mile in the wrong direction. It was horrible. And we had gotten to a stalemate where we had reached this sort of strip of swamp that was unpassable. Maybe if we had waders, maybe we could have passed it. I don't know, but it was an easement where all the brush was cut down to level by probably the electrical company or whatnot, so they can access the wires in there, the high tension wires in there. So we couldn't get through there. So the only way is to backtrack. Now, Scott, who is a Marine, which is wonderful navigational skills, he decided that, you know what, I'm going to venture off in this direction and see if I can find a way through. Because rather than backtrack, if we could make it through this 80 yards of swamp, we'd be home free. And I knew exactly where we were, but we were on the other side of this, what I always called impassable swamp for the 5 or 6 years prior to hunting that area. We were just on the other side of it. So if we backtracked, we're looking at least in the woods for another couple hours. But if we could get through it, we'd kind of be out in 25 minutes. So he ventured off that way, and he never came back, ever. So he called us. It wasn't like he was a missing persons, and I'll get to that story afterwards. But he went out, and he didn't come back. And we waited there for about 35, 40 minutes. He's like, "Yeah, I'm not coming back. I I don't know where I am, but I can't make it back. I had to walk through like chest deep swamp to get here. And so that was me and Jim. So me and Jim, we just decided to backtrack. We backtrack and we got a good line. Luckily he had marked where his stand was before on the GPS. So he knew exactly where that was, and we had a good line. It was through rough terrain, but we were going to make it. So we had to backtrack, go up this hill. Now all this time we're dragging a deer, so it's not like we're just walking through the woods. So finally, Jim gets fed up with me, and he goes, take your bow and just throw it over there. Now, I have an $1,800 bow. Matthews E7, all the fixings on it and everything. I said, excuse me? What? You want me to do what? With what? He goes, take it and put it under some leaves over there. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll get it. Because I was dragging with one hand and he was dragging with two hands. And he says, no one is going to look for a $2,000 bow under those leaves right there by tomorrow. I said, you know what? You're probably right. So I ditched my bow and we both started dragging. And we were going in the right direction. So we had there was a light at the end of the tunnel. So we continued to drag at this point in time. Now we at this point in time, it is probably 3:30, pushing 4 o'clock. It's starting to get dark out. And we had not had any food or water or anything. So I got on the horn and I found my friend Andrew. I said, Andrew, we know where we're going. This is where we're going to be. If you could grab us some water or some food or anything and go to my truck in the parking lot and grab my sled to help us get this deer out and meet us here. When you get to here, just start yelling and we should be close. So we're dragging the deer, and this deer is catching on every stump, every log, every piece of briar, everything. And my friend Jim had a meltdown, a complete meltdown. He's like, you stupid fucking deer, you got and stuck on every fucking piece of motherfucking thing. He just starts flipping out completely. It wasn't funny at the time, but it's funny now. So it got stuck in everything. I mean, he took the whole deer and just threw it. He was pissed at it. It was quite an event. So I was just like, well, just leave the fucking thing here. I don't care about it anymore. He's like, no, we're not leaving this damn deer here. Now in retrospect, I probably just should have cut it up in pieces and, taken it out in chunks. Leave the rib cage. He carries 2 legs, I carry 2 legs, and be done with it. And we'll take the back straps, we'll put them, he had a backpack, we could have shoved them in there. But anyway, so we get back to where we originally started. By this time, it's close to 5 o'clock. Now, we started this trek around 9 a.m. Andrew has water for us. He had met us there. He has water. Jim had a ham and cheese sandwich near his stand. We split it. I got some of it. We got a call from Scott. Scott is like, well, can you guys come and pick me up with the canoe? And we're like, what? He says, well, I made it to the edge of the pond, but I don't know where I am. If you paddle down the river of the lake, you might be able to find me. So we were like, what the fuck? How are we going to, we're not even out of the woods with the deer. How are we going to go get a canoe and go pick up him? So we basically told him he was on his own. We were like, well, what the fuck are we going to do? So Andrew came with this harness that it's like a deer drag, but it's a harness. And he came with the sled. So we let him take it there. We were completely burnt out. We had, my legs were burning, my arms were burning. I really had no energy left to drag this deer anymore. I was completely spent. At the very least, I needed just to rest and get some nutrients into me, and then I could go. Jim, he said, now we're back to where we started. So we were probably a 25-minute regular walking speed from the car. So Jim says, you know what, I'm going to hustle. It's getting dark. I've got the canoe on my thing. I'm going to get out there. I'll put that in the lake, and I'll go try to find Scott. You guys have this? We have this. So we put the deer on the sled. Here's a picture of it on the sled. And Andrew hooks up this harness thing to him, and we just both grab, and we hightail it out of there. Now we're on a walking path now, so the movement is quick. So we're moving, and we're moving, and we're moving. And it's dark. by now, and we don't really have much light. That's another thing. We didn't bring many flashlights with us because it was a day hunt. We didn't think that we'd be in there at night. So we have our phones, which mine was dead. He had his phone, but we could stay on the walking path. So we're at the walking path, and we are probably, I don't know, 5-10 minutes from the parking lot. Andrew says, I got to take a break. I've been going full speed the whole time. I said, yeah, no problem. And I look behind me, and there are about, I would say, 5 to 6 sets of eyes staring at me. Coyotes. So I was like, oh shit, what do I do? So I grabbed Andrew. Andrew's younger than us. So I'm in my 40s. Jim was in his 40s. Scott was in his 40s, but Andrew's he's a young buck. He's in his 20s. And I grab him by the scruff of his pants. I'm like, all right, Andrew, let's go. He's like, what's the matter? Oh, nothing. Let's go. You know, and those dogs were right on our tail, and they were going to take that deer from us. And I was like, oh my goodness. So he's like, what's that? He says, what's that? Nothing. There's nothing back there. Nothing for you to see. Let's just go. And we did. And we made it out to the car, and I told him afterwards that there were probably a good pack of coyotes right behind us that may or may not have confronted us, but they were a little too close for comfort, and I didn't have a bow or a knife or anything to fight them off. We did have a deer that I was not surrendering because I had worked way too hard. So we made it back to the car. You know, when we got it to the car, we noticed that one whole side of the deer was completely skinned. Well, not skinned, all the way down to the hide. It was bald on one side. So it was a completely tenderized deer so we took it to the butcher. So I ended up driving it to the butcher that night, telling the story, having fun with it. And this is the meat that I got in there. And that's basically the whole story, except when we were packing it up, Jim came out of like the woods, and when we noticed his canoe was still on his truck, and Scott had walked back through the lake, I think. He had just followed the edge of the lake the whole time, and he was completely soaked in mud and God knows what. So that's my story of the second deer. My buddies call it the pincushion deer because I plugged so many arrows into it. Not the ultimate outcome, but we did recover the deer, and I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoy the content, please like, subscribe, and I don't know, tune in again. All right? Be well.